Howdy YouTube, and welcome to this episode of Gunman. So today we're going to be doing the entire prime, prep, mask and paint procedure on this FG XR6. So it's an entire full respray, and as you can see here, this is how I got the job. The panel beaters have obviously done their repairs and comes into the paint shop ready for me to take over. So the first thing I did was to just make sure that the panel beaters didn't miss any small dents, because they usually do. A lot of the time, yeah, it's just up to us painters to do those smaller ones. It's up to you to identify them and then fix them. So that's what you see me doing there. I'm just getting a piece of tape and going over and marking them out so that I can then do those repairs as needed. I also checked over his repairs too, as it did turn out a couple of his repairs were more just a little bit too full. So that's easier to deal with than having not enough filler in, because if there's not enough filler in there, then I've got to reapply. And that was the case for one of the doors on the other side of the car. Actually, I did have to reapply some body filler in one of the doors on the other side, but most of it was just a case of giving it a little bit more of a block down, because as I say, I think he just left just a little bit too much in, so not the end of the world. And what you see me doing on this door here, there was just actually more some ripples, so they weren't like really sharp or deep dents or anything like that. They were more just some minor ripples, so I decided just to use the material that was already on the body of the car to just block into it. And then obviously we're going to apply some spray filler, so some high build primer. And as you can see here on the bonnet, I'm just blocking down a little bit of his excess filler, so not the end of the world. The blocks that I'm using are the 3M block kit. I actually managed to get these blocks on special. There was like a sale on here in Australia, and I got them for half price. So they're like $100 kit. They're usually $200 kit, but I got them for $100, so I was pretty lucky with that. And this is that little bit that I was telling you guys about on the other side. So yeah, it wasn't the best, this repair here. There was a bit of a ski jump on the end, so it's a real ripple or a real low spot in that panel. So obviously I've just decided to apply some more body filler. And those who are regular to the channel will probably know this filler. I'm actually a big fan of it. It's UV cured body filler, and it's really good stuff. It dries really fast, it dries nice and hard as well. And yeah, I must say I've been very impressed with how this stuff works. So the brand is Nuva. Basically a quick rundown of it. It's not that much different than standard body filler. However, the way it cures is with the UV light. So yeah, as you see there, just put it in and block it out. One thing I will say is that I've noticed that you need to use a slightly coarser sanding grit to start off with, and then work your way down through the grades. So if this is say normal fine filler, I could possibly even go 120 grit to start blocking and then 180 grit. Whereas with this UV filler, I'd go 80, 120, then 180 grit, and then prime over the top. Believe it or not, this stuff actually tends not to have pinholes in it, so you can actually paint straight over it. Like I was actually doing this job, and it was like a bit of an older car, so it doesn't really matter that much. And I just had a feeling that it would be okay to put base coat straight over the top of it. And as it turned out, I was right. Believe it or not, you can actually paint straight over that body filler. I mean, it's insane. So yeah, as I say, I do actually have a full review on that stuff, so be sure to go and check that out if you are interested. But we're just going to be smashing right through each step on this job. So once you're happy that you've got all your repairs to a standard that you're ready to prime over, that's when we start going around and feathering out the repairs. So making sure there's no deep scratches. Now I must say that panel beaters seem to be a little bit better these days than what they were back in the day. Like some of the old school panel beaters back in the day, they would just finish their repairs off with like 40 or 80 grit. Whereas these days, it seems to be pretty standard. Like 180 is a minimum for most panel beaters, and that's totally fine to prime straight over. So as I say, there's actually not as much feathering these days as was required back when I was an apprentice. So as much as anything, we're just scuffing up the surrounding paint to make sure that our primer is going to stick. So I like to do that with 320 or 240 grit. A lot of the time it's 320 grit, just so that we don't cause too many cut throughs. However, back in the day it was always 240, because as I say, the panel beaters did actually used to use some coarser sanding papers to finish off their repairs. Once you're happy with the orbital stage, go around, get your edges done. A couple of different ways you can do that. Personally, I like to use these little hand sanding pads. I find that they do probably a little bit of a better job than red Scotch-Brite, but if that's all you've got, then that's totally going to be fine. But yeah, just basically make sure all the edges are not shiny. That's the rule of thumb. As long as they're not shiny, it's going to be sticking just fine. Again, going down the side, blowing and inspecting as you go. Get the dust off and see where you're at. So that's pretty much it for down this side. I'm pretty happy that we've got rid of all the shiny spots. The repairs are up to a standard that I'm happy with. And then the next stage for the side will obviously be masking and then putting some primer down. But I've still got some more prep work to do over this side. So I'm using one of my favorite tools here. This is my Milwaukee cordless drill. And I actually got this I got this so that I could get the batteries for my cordless polisher. And I just thought, well, I mean, it's more economical. I kind of got the drill and a impact driver for, it worked out an extra $250 than what it was going to cost me to just get the batteries to go into my cordless polisher. So I thought, why not? I'll get that drill. And I didn't actually have a use for it at the start. And then I thought, you know what? That's going to be a really good rubber wheel remover, and as it turned out, it obviously was. So yeah, really happy to have that addition to my little toolkit. I've actually recently done a prep cart review or tour, so be sure to go and check that out if you would like a more in-depth look over my prep trolley. So check that out. And obviously now we're up onto the masking stage, so no doubt you've noticed that I've sped this stage up quite considerably. That first section was at 4 times speed, and yeah, this same here, this is at 4 times speed as well, just to stop it from getting too long, to hopefully keep your attention the entire way through the video. So this video here has actually been shot at 4K. Most of my videos previously were shot at 2.7K, and the regulars will probably notice that I've actually put you guys on the tripod, whereas a lot of my video footage is using the head cam. So let us know what you think. Do you prefer the GoPro on the head cam, or do you prefer it on the tripod? And I can start changing it up a little bit. So here we are in the booth, and as you can see, we're priming it in the booth. Main reason was just so that we could get a bake out of it. I was actually hoping, so I did this job here on the Friday night, and I was smashing it out, like getting it done as quick as I possibly could. I was hoping to get it primed up and then baked out, and then I was hoping to take it out to the back in the detailing bay and give it a good blast down and a clean down prior to doing the prep work, because the car here, I mean, it's probably about a 10 to 15 year old car now, and there's bits of dirt and, you know, leaves and all that kind of stuff all through the jams of the car. So I did want to, and I did end up doing that, but it just turns out I didn't actually quite have enough time to do that on this same day. I just baked it out, left it sit over the weekend as well. So I did do that for a good reason, to make all the shrinking back happen before we do the sanding stage. So yeah, like all these polyurethane paints, they're going to shrink back, but you just want them to shrink back before you paint over them. So the primers, that is. So obviously, luckily, I do have a spray booth with baking functions. Not everybody does. Say if you were doing this at home, let's just say it was the middle of summer here in Australia, I would probably prime it up and leave it out in the sun for a couple of weeks if I could. Just let it sun bake, or maybe 1 week. In that full Aussie sun, 1 week would probably be more than enough. However, if it was in winter or in a colder climate, I would just leave it for a month, just to let the two packs shrink right back into those sanding scratches of our primer work. I mean, there's another thing that you could do, is just take the sanding scratches of your filler and primer down a little bit finer than otherwise if you were in a bit of a hurry and you didn't have a bake cycle. So there's always different ways around it. And that's actually another thing that I really do like about those UV fillers and primers, is that they don't shrink. It's quite amazing technology, really. So as you can see here, I gave it a bake out. This is on the Monday morning now. I then got the guy to put the windows up. I've got some degreaser, just gone to town on it and got the high pressure cleaner and just blasted out all of those door jams, the window openings and all that kind of stuff, to help get rid of all that dirt before we go and do our prep work. You could go and give it another clean down after you do your prep work if you like. I decided that it wasn't necessary. However, in hindsight, I probably should have. I wish I did, to be honest. Like, there was a few more nibs in this job than what I am used to and what I would like. So I can't help but think an extra quick hose down before masking, I reckon that really would have helped. So look, I've been doing this for 21 years and I'm always learning from my own little minute mistakes, and I'm always trying to improve my procedures. So yeah, I forgot to mention earlier, but the color code on this is MY. It's a Ford Australian color and the name is Mystic. So I know that there's probably going to be quite a few people that love this color. It really is quite a beautiful color, I reckon. It's like green and blue pearl. I think it looks great. So I remembered actually I didn't remember where all of the repairs were, but I took photos. So that's another little bit of advice I can give you. Painters out there, take a few photos of the cars when they're in body filler stages, so you know where you need to block. And that's exactly what I did. That's why I'm only blocking where the repairs were on this car. And one thing that I actually really love about where I'm working now is the setup in the workshop. So yes, you may notice I don't actually have a vacuum attachment for my blocks. The blocks don't actually have attachments on them for a vacuum, but I have a beautiful prep bay there, so all of the dust literally gets sucked straight down. So I was using 180 grit to block the car down with. Once I'm happy I've got the block work done, I then go and get those 180 grit scratches out with the Orbital Sander, as you see here, and I'm using some 320 grit. Once I've got that done, I'll go around the edges with some 500 grit, and then I'll go back over the faces with some 500 grit on the Orbital Sander, and then I will finish it off finally with some 800 grit by hand. Now, if I was planning to use some wet on wet primer on this job, I would have just finished it in 320 grit and then 500 on the edges. So I'm happy that the wet on wet would fill it up. But on this job here, I decided not to use any wet on wet primer. And look, I'm using PPG for this job. I forgot to mention that earlier. So strangely, they don't actually have a black sandable primer. I mean, I know some people are going to say, oh, you can use the non-sanding primer or the wet on wet primer, but I used it once and I really didn't like the way it performed. I found that it clogged the sandpaper up and it didn't seem to dry as nicely as the LVP 219, which is the light grey primer which you saw that I put on here. So it is what it is. I mean, you actually, on the topic of primer, you may notice that there's two slightly different shades, and that was actually because we ran out of primer halfway through the job. I didn't realize when I started the job that they didn't have any of a backup, so I just had to use some other primer which they had sitting around. I mean, it did the job. It's all 2-pack primers, and it got me through. But next up, sanding the rest of the job down, and as you see there, I'm using a little bit of that UV body filler again just to fix the stone chips. It's literally like 10 to 15 seconds. We'll have it cured. I then use the razor blade to shave most of the excess out, and then a quick sand over the top with some 320 grit, and you're done. So you can probably see a person like me who just loves getting in and smashing the jobs out as fast as possible. You can see why I do love this stuff so much. Moving right along, once I'm happy I've got my prep work done, we'll give it a good blow down with the high pressured air blower, making sure you get into all the edges, all the nooks and crannies properly. And then once we've got it into the booth, I just gave it a bit of a wipe down with the microfiber cloths, which is something that I've been doing lately. So microfiber cloths with some water cleaner, and it seems to give it a pretty good deep clean. So as I say, look, I do probably regret not taking it out at this point or prior to putting it into the booth. I should have given it another quick blast down, and even if it took an extra 5 minutes or 10 minutes to blow all the water out of the jams, it probably would have been worth it, and we may have saved that time back, if not more, when it came to the polishing stage. But as I say, hey, I'm not here to try and make out as if I'm perfect. If you can learn something from one of my mistakes, well then that's all good, you know. So as you can see here, so around all the windows, I use some trim tape, so that actually lifts the rubber up and allows you to get some paint right inside there, so you're not going to be left with a edge and possible flaking or peeling paint. And obviously just threw a piece of plastic over the rest of the car, cut it all out, taped it all down, and here we are. Next step is to give it a wipe down with some Prepsol or wax and grease remover, and again you're noticing me using those microfiber cloths. That's something I've only really started to do recently. I never used to use microfiber cloths. People have been telling me to do it for years. I think Gabriel from Motivated Painters, shout out to you Gabriel, I hope you're watching. If not, go and check out his page. He's got a YouTube channel and a big Instagram page there as well. Yeah, be sure to go and check him out. But he's the one that got lots of people onto the use of the microfiber cloths, and I can say I'm definitely a convert. But one thing I would like to say about them is use them once and then clean them out. So what I do is just take them out the back into the detailing bay, give them a quick squirt down with some degreaser, and then blast them off with a high pressure cleaner, wring them out, and then put them up in the booth, or just leave them anywhere just to dry overnight and then reuse them. So that's one thing that actually stopped me from using them a lot earlier. It was the fact that I didn't quite realize that you could clean them out so effectively. They really do clean out quite well. Anyway, base coat stage. As I said before, we're using the PPG Enviro base. So look, I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to say it's the best paint system I've ever used. It doesn't cover as good as many of the other paint systems. It's not as fast. I could continue going on, but it would just sound as if I'm shitting on it. But I don't hate it, don't get me wrong. It's just not quite as good as the Axalta system. So this color actually wasn't that bad, considering it's a greeny bluey color. But you may notice this first coat, I really did have to put it on quite heavy to get coverage. Now I have mentioned it in some of my other videos, I don't really like to put wet on wet primer down when I can avoid it, and that's why I decided not to put it down. Now on that topic, I do actually quite like the PPG wet on wet primer, but I've just found that you do end up with a slightly better finish when you don't use it. So in all the door jams, sometimes you can get that little bit of wet on wet primer coming through the jam and then the color doesn't follow it. However, if you just go color straight over the top, well then, yeah, I've just found that you're only going to get obviously that color in the door jam and your clear coat, rather than having that extra layer of primer or wet on wet primer. Anyway, when we do put the base coat down, I just go first coat, full fluid, full fan, or I actually wind the fan in half a turn now, which you don't have to do, and 25 psi. And then second coat, so it's a pretty straightforward method. I found this off RHD Joe on Instagram, so shout out to him if he's watching. He's from Texas and he must have been using the PPG Enviro base for a while now. I believe this system is pretty popular over there in America. But then from there, so your first coat, 25 psi full fluid, you just drop the psi by 5 psi and wind the fluid in half a turn each coat until you get to 3 coats. And look, I've actually done a couple of other videos on this method. So if you get to 3 coats, and let's just say you're spraying a silver and you need to give it a little bit more, another drop coat, leave it at the same settings as the third coat. So your third coat settings are going to be 15 psi, 15 to 17 psi, and 1 turn in on the fluid. And so you would leave it there if you need to put any extra coats on. Anyway, moving right along onto the clear coat stage. So I'm using this gun here, which is my Sander True Soul Edition 1.3i, and it's a RP. So as you can see there, it definitely pumps a nice amount of clear on, nice and fast. And yeah, I've been really enjoying using it, specifically on the resprays, because it is the 1.3. I'm actually thinking of getting the 1.3 in the DV1. Currently I've only got that in a 1.2, so it'll be interesting to see how that stacks up against the Sander RP, if it's as fast, if the fan is as big and even. So as I say, I guess stay tuned. I've actually got another review coming soon, which is the C2 air cap on the DeVilbiss DV1. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see how it stacks up against this Sander. But hey, this Sander is a bit of a ripper gun. It does have a very nice big fan. It's nice and fast, and yeah, I can't fault it at the moment. But that's not to say I can't fault all of the Sanders, because when these guns were new, I actually got like, I think it came out with 5, like they gave me a full selection of all the different setups, air caps and tips and all that. And then out of the 5 setups that I got, I think 2 of them were defective. 2 or 3 of them were defective. Now, I got this gun here just earlier this year, and I thought, like, so when I did my review, I actually probably went a little bit soft on the side, because I thought by now surely they would have ironed out those issues. But after doing this review, I had a few people leaving comments saying that they literally just got exactly the same gun as this with the I setup on it. So as I said, it's a 1.3 RPI. So there's I and O patterns in this gun here. And yeah, supposedly they're actually still shipping with defective fans on them. So yeah, I just thought I would make a quick mention to that. And yeah, apologies for not mentioning that in my recent review, because obviously I overlooked it because I just thought I gave them the benefit of the doubt that they would have fixed their shit by now. But when you get a good one, they're good. So the clear coat that I used on this job here is the PPG LVC 136, and the thinning ratio is 3:1 to 0.8. So the 0.8 is reducer. If you want that in a percentage, I really couldn't tell you. That's one strange thing that PPG do with their thinning ratios. They've just got some bizarre ways of telling you how to thin your paint down. So like most paint systems, it would be say 3:1 plus 10%. Now the plus is important, and the 10%, anyone can like make sense out of that. Whereas the 0.8, I don't even know what that is in a percentage. And then if I want to put it up to 0.9, I've got no idea what that is in a percentage either. If I want to put it up to or down to 0.6 or whatever it is, I don't know. It's just a bizarre way that PPG do their paint system. I know there's lots of people out there that totally hate it. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate it. It's just they do some weird things. But anyway, that's about it for this job here. Obviously you can see there, we've got all the parts in there in the booth. I sprayed them out. We're not going to be doing much on this, just a quick look at the fact that I did them. But obviously same procedure, prep them all up, put them all on the stands and spray them up. So yeah, that's one thing that I do love about this shop, the way that they go about a job like this. So they just pull the wheels off. They just got the apprentice to give the wheels a quick coat of paint. They do all the door handles, they do all the mirrors and all that kind of thing. They'll polish up the door surrounds and all that. So it's just like a really good way of finishing the customer's car off. And doesn't that look just beautiful? I mean, yeah, to me, that's a really nice, neat job. Is it perfect? No. I mean, you could always go over and find some imperfections in it. But it's bought this car a new lease on life. Personally, I would actually like to see more of this kind of thing done. I do know that it's expensive to do this kind of thing, but we do live in such a throwaway society. You hear all these people preaching about the environment, but they just buy things, throw them out, and then buy new things. If you really care about the environment, you should be fixing what you have rather than just reproducing things every time they get a little bit old. All that aside, thanks heaps for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. If you'd like to support the show, be sure to go and check out some merchandise. There's a link in the description. We've got loads of high quality new merchandise. Those Gunman Russell Athletic jackets are top notch. We're actually going to be doing a merch giveaway, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Until next time, get out there and paint some shit. Gunman out.
When the lights go down, I've seen hell in you, but you don't care, no, you don't care, no, you just rather